Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, China fires water cannons at Philippine vessels headed to Ayungin Shoal, prompting outrage from the international community. The Chinese Coast Guard defends its latest aggressive acts in the West Philippine Sea, and President Bongbong Marcos assures farmers the government will not import rice if local supply is enough. Senator and former Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano joins us in the program. China is once again on the receiving end of global condemnation after it fired water cannons at Philippine vessels during a resupply mission in Ayungin Shoal last Saturday. Philippine allies slammed China's aggressive acts in the West Philippine Sea. They said disputes must be resolved peacefully and not by force. Meanwhile, Chinese Coast Guard Bureau spokesperson Gan Yu told the Philippines to stop its infringement activities in the area, which China insists is under Beijing's jurisdiction despite the 2016 arbitral ruling. Let's go straight to the source of the story. We have Senator and former Foreign Affairs Secretary Alan Peter Cayetano. Senator Alan, I was going to say Secretary, welcome to the show. It's good to see you again. How have you been?
It's good to see you, Pinky. Really glad and praise God for the opportunity to be on the source. Of course, medyo very bothered and hindi po maganda talaga yung ginagawa ng China, and very grateful to Japan, Australia, EU, the US for condemning this, and I hope magka-opportunity to settle this not only once and for all but in the short term.
Pag hindi maganda, what should government do now? So, just for context, it was last Saturday when a Chinese Coast Guard ship used a water cannon on Philippine vessels on a resupply mission to Ayungin Shoal. So, what should government do now?
Well, one word, we should do everything. Now, we should do everything, but kailangan natin ng wisdom here. You cannot hate your enemy. If you hate your enemy at magiging emotional ka, you will stop studying their history, their stand, and their reaction to whatever we will do. So hindi tayo sunod-sunuran. We're a sovereign nation. We're in the right. Hindi talaga tama yung might is right. Having said that, di ba, superpowers act a certain way. So whether you're talking about China, the former USSR, the US, so meaning if we were Cuba and there were certain actions we would take, hindi sapat sabihin mali ang US or mali ang China. We should be very deliberate in what we're going to do. But with this last incident, with the water cannons, I really believe we're entering a period of brinkmanship diplomacy. Yung talagang pagka nagkamali, pagka may pagkakamali or may aksidente dyan, it can really cause instability in the region. And it's unfortunate that we see that China is forcing us into that situation of brinkmanship. But yun nga, we're a peaceful nation, so yung brinkmanship, let's bring it out of the arena of the Coast Guard and the Navy, which can really cause accidents, and bring it to the diplomats.
Okay. Senator, when you said everything, should, number one, the DFA file another diplomatic protest?
Yes. I mean, very clear naman yun. There are purpose for a diplomatic protest, and in general, I do not agree with megaphone or microphone diplomacy, because it has been proven that with China, it's more effective to talk one-on-one. But pag ganito ka blatant, and also for the morale of our men and women in the Coast Guard, and also for our neighbors to see that hindi naman tayo papayag. Remember, Pinky, ang Malaysia at saka Vietnam, ang Malaysia has 11 features that are that have been, may mga reclamation dyan, may military assets dyan. Ganun din ang Malaysia, may 5 inside our EEZ. So it's also very important for our neighbors to see na although we are in alliance with them, we're dealing with them in ASEAN, we have good relationship with them, we're dealing with them in our strategy versus China, but it's also good for them to see that hindi tayo push over, and you can't do that to us. No?
Yeah, but Senator, as a former secretary of the DFA, I can imagine hundreds of diplomatic protests were also launched back then. In fact, during the Marcos administration, 1 year, a little over 1 year, over 100 diplomatic protests have been filed. Sir, when you filed diplomatic protests as former DFA secretary and as a sitting senator now, and it seems to fall on deaf ears, how does that feel?
Iba yung sitwasyon namin na Pinky, because we took a very holistic approach. We looked at the overall bilateral relationship. No, we looked at the people to people. We looked at the economy, at tourism, at possible Chinese participation in our infrastructure projects. We looked at our voting patterns in the UN with them, no? And then, of course, as a Christian, we took a providential view of history, no? Meaning yung kamay ng Diyos sa lahat ng ginagawa. And we really believe dun sa Proverbs na when your ways please the Lord, even your enemies are at peace with you, no? So, meaning ano muna yung context, ha? Yung context, pagpasok ng Duterte administration, it was like this. Kaliwat kanan yung problema, yung aggression, yung harassment nandun. So we looked at it as an opportunity. So how do we be able to approach the Chinese and say na, sandali lang, reset muna tayo ha, wala munang ganyanan. What's your red lines? What's our red lines? And one of their irritants, no, was the megaphone or microphone diplomacy, yung maraming protest. And when I researched, no, I found out even during the Aquino administration, for example, we weren't filing protests against Vietnam and Malaysia. Palaki ng palaki yung mga hawak nilang islands. They were putting military assets, but we were being quiet about it. And that was a fake news that if you don't protest, mawawala yung claim mo dyan. No? That was a misinformation to our people. So once we clarified that, we used it when necessary. No? And there came a time, Pinky, na meron tentative or meron na understanding, if I can call it that, about Ayungin Shoal. And hindi naman nawala totally, pero nabawasan significantly, no, yung problema sa pagre-resupply. And in fact, it was quite peaceful noon. So right now, I'm occupying my time talaga in trying to find out ano ba ang gusto ng China, ano ba ang gusto nilang ipakita, bakit biglang bumalik sa ganitong sitwasyon, no? And definitely, their strategic rivalry with U.S. and our closeness to U.S. is one of those factors. It's not the only factor, but it's one of those factors.
But it was also during 2021, during the Duterte administration, looking back, sir, that a similar incident happened during a resupply mission in Ayungin Shoal. 2021, there were 3 Chinese ships. 2 of them, hinarang po yung ating Philippine vessel, and yung isa, winotor cannon din po yung ating barko, no, yung ating vessel. So, while you say that there was a different approach back then, during the Duterte administration, fast forward 2 years later, they're doing the same thing, sir.
Definitely during the last year of President Duterte and during that time na nagsasagutan na naman ang Philippines at China, not only sa media but also sa Twitter, nagkaroon ng mga ganyan reaction, no? Kasi nga, nung time ko, Pinky, and that was a short time, no? Mga 18 months lang, grabe yung coordination, not only with China, but coordination ng DFA, ng Coast Guard, ng military. So, anything that can cause a problem. For example, no, nag-usap kami na Coast Guard to Coast Guard, dapat nag-uusap ang China and Philippines. And dapat walang nagsasalita sa Coast Guard ng China against the Philippines, walang nagsasalita sa Coast Guard ng Philippines against China, para may isa man lang na referee. Why? Because lives ng ating mga fishermen at saka mga bumabiyahe sa dagat ang at stake dyan. So let the presidential spokesman, let the diplomats, let the military speak against each other, pero wag yung Coast Guard. And every time na magkaroon ng ganyan, nagkakaroon ng pag-uusap, may suspicion kasi talaga yung Chinese na magtatayo tayo somewhere. From the start, gusto nila talagang alisin yung ating home base o yung ship natin dyan sa Ayungin Shoal.
Sierra
No?
Madre.
And from the start, I made it very clear to them that that's unacceptable to us. And if they claim that past administrations have promised them na aalis yon. Of course, wala naman akong basis at ang paniniwalaan ko yung sarili nating records, hindi yung salita
Okay.
nila. Having said that, I take it in good faith that they said that na may nagsabi sa kanila. So the negotiation started there. So walang question, Pinky, na we're in the right.
Okay.
But having said that, there are strategic reasons. So for example, no, they're a superpower. They're thinking about their security. And the US have declared them their strategic rival, no? And they're doing freedom of navigation. They're sailing in those waters that threatens in their view, threatens their security. If you ask them, 80% no, of their energy needs dyan sa South China Sea, West Philippine Sea dumadaan. 40% of all their trade nandyan. So the Chinese will tell us, anong freedom of navigation? Kaming unang malulugi, kaming unang mawawalan ng energy, ng kuryente, kami unang magsasuffer kung walang freedom of navigation dyan. So kami magpro-protect dyan. But by going into these waters, it's actually our security. So you have to put yourself in the mind of a superpower. That's the way they think. It's not right, but that's the way we think. So how do you deal with them? That's why I'm saying, yes, right now with what's happening, mas aggressive, mas brinkmanship yung diplomacy. We really have to see them at a very high level and say na, you know, what's causing all of this? Why the sudden aggression, harassment? Why did we come to an agreement for a short period, no, whether it's 24 months or 36 months? Then why at the last year of the Duterte administration and now, no? And remember, they told us before, no, that they respect and they do want us to be close to our very close ally, the US. But ang hinihingi lang nila, dapat walang pakialam ang ibang country sa bilateral relationship natin with China.
Okay.
So go ahead, have friends, have very close relationship. So I think they're also very concerned sa mga news sa EDCA, and they're also very concerned kung totoong maglalagay tayo ng missile sa North, sa Cagayan o hindi. And I'm concerned, diba? Because that's what caused the standoff sa Cuba at saka yung problema sa Turkey nung ang USSR ay naglagay ng missile sa Cuba and yung US naglagay naman ng missile sa Turkey. So under international rules, international law, they can do that. That's their country. But under the natural reaction and actions of superpowers, they'll act a different way. Which last point, I want to link to our economy. You know, if everything is good in the Philippines and walang nagugutom, walang shifting ang ating school, maganda yung internet, lahat tama yung kita, then we can put all of our focus here. But the reality is we cannot blink from or step away from territorial and sovereign rights issues. Kailangan natin tutukan yan. But the reality is may potential crisis sa rice, sa presyo ng bigas, and then maraming hindi pa nakaka-recover sa pandemic, and our economy is still developing, and even our Navy and Coast Guards needs their ships. So we have to relate the two when we're dealing with China.
Senator, quickly, no? You said a lot. Number one, sabi mo, file a diplomatic protest. Obviously, you said yes to that. Should the Chinese ambassador be summoned?
Yes, in the sense that it's important to show our indignation. It's important to show that this is unacceptable. But it should actually include a very heartfelt dialogue that, what will it take? So for me, ang magsasamon, hindi na nga presidente, kahit ang magsamon yung DFA secretary, because he can do that. Use the word summon so that it's very clear that this is a very strong protest. But during the time na nag-uusap, there really has to be if I can use the word, heart-to-heart, na, Your Excellency, we know there is a problem. We know that we have conflicting claims, but we have found a way, to deal with this peacefully and to put stability. Why is this all happening? At what level can we solve this? And how can we solve it short term, di ba? Long term kasi, Pinky, talagang complicated ito, no? And may usapan naman yung Section 5 ng DOC with ASEAN, which is walang mag-o-occupy ng bago. But there's always a suspicion between us, ASEAN and China, na ang China magtatayo ng bago. And then there is a suspicion sila sa atin. And to be frank, there are always minds, there are always hawks in government, in all governments, in Malaysia, in Vietnam, in the Philippines, in China, na gustong magtayo kaagad dyan at gustong, how do I put it, no? Hindi naman manglamang kasi every
Lay
nation
claim
thinks lamang
siguro,
yung isa.
sir. Lay claim.
Diba? That they want to humabol, diba? Humabol sa reclamation or sa presence ng iba.
Okay.
Pero meron parang silent tolerance talaga na kung ano yung hawak mo, magpapalaki ka dyan. But many people don't know that Vietnam have 11 features within our EEZ and Malaysia has 5. And pinagaganda nila at minimilitarize din nila ito. So as a country, we shouldn't only have a strategy against China. We also have to have a strategy of working and being closer to Vietnam and Malaysia, but working it out that there is no military threat to us.
Senator, there's still a lot to discuss, but I need to take a break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, former Foreign Affairs Secretary and now Senator Alan Peter Cayetano. Sir, should we still pursue talks with China and the ASEAN on the COC or the Code of Conduct?
Definitely the COC, because this will help us not only with China, no? Malaking tulong to, including with Malaysia and Vietnam, no? So, I've told our colleagues on the floor, hindi naman sikreto to, what if for some reason, no, for just some reason, China withdraws from the West Philippine Sea? We will not be at a strategic advantage because Malaysia and Vietnam have been very strategic. Again, Vietnam has 11 within our EEZ, and Malaysia has 5. Taiwan, which we consider part of China, meron din, at medyo malaki na yung reclamation ng Taiwan, and Taiwan also objected from the arbitration award, no? So yes, to just add 2 quick things we should also do, in my opinion, we should really ask China, are you still interested in joint exploration of oil and gas? Because when you're partners, and if we can find a legal framework that will not violate our constitution, and we were close to doing that before the state visit of President Xi Jinping. Pag mag-partners kayo at pareho kayong nakikinabang dyan sa oil and gas, definitely may peace eh. Kasi ang magkapitbahay pwede mag-away everyday for whatever reason. Pero yung kapitbahay, kung our business partners at maganda ang takbo ng business, will not fight with each other,
Senator,
no? And at the start, they were offering us the same or better terms.
Pwede ho bang it gets worse na ang kapartner mo ay kaaway mo sa pinagtatalunan na area, na maging kaaway mo o lumala pa yung isang partner na patuloy na hinaharas po yung inyong citizenry? I mean, how siguro safe is that? And obviously that's still something you want to pursue, to partner with them, because you believe that a certain partnership with China will somehow better the relationship between the Philippines and China.
No, that's an excellent question. In the DFA, in the academe, around the world, that's always being asked. That's always a fair question. That's always something we should ponder. And even if we say 100%, let's do it, someone should ask that question, Pinky. And this is our conclusion. Now, when they offered us the same terms or better terms than Shell and Malampaya, why trust them? Well, first of all, with our allies, none of our allies are guaranteeing us that if we drill for oil, they will protect us and babantayan tayo. We've asked. But ang sagot nila, they do not get into territorial disputes. And some of our closest allies, like the US, have called China's claims unlawful, but they're not a signatory to UNCLOS. So they will not also endorse our specific claim regarding that. No, excuse me. So is it safe to go into them? As long as legal, maganda yung legal framework. Kasi remember, Pinky, ayaw din ng China to eh. I mean, of course, they want to claim so much of the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. And of course, we can see the aggressiveness. But they also want peace and stability there. They also want to grow their economy. So ako, I don't really care kung sinong partner, but ang point ng UNCLOS is not only to protect your sovereign rights, it's also to use it. It's also na makinabang ka sa living and non-living resources dyan, so whether it's fisheries or whether it's oil and gas. So, and yes, it is a technique, no? So for example, kung magkapitbahay tayo, Pinky, may malaking puno ng mangga. Every time you get yung bunga, I get mad at inaaway kita. Every time ako kumuha ng bunga, nag-aaway. But if we have a legal framework, o sige, saka na natin pag-usapan kung sino may-ari. But eto batas sa bahay ko, yan ang batas sa bahay mo, and we follow it at nakikinabang tayo, there will be symbols of peace and stability there, no? It won't be a perfect agreement, but we will get there.
Right.
So the second thing we should do also, just to relate it, Pinky, to the other side, we have to clarify with the US the Mutual Defense Treaty, and we have to be better negotiators, no? Mababait ang Pilipino, matatapang ang Pilipino, pero minsan sa agreements, whether it's with China, whether it's with ASEAN, whether it's with the economy, yung mga trade agreements, or with the US, hindi tayo masyadong aggressive at hindi historical yung approach. So, kasi for me, if you negotiate it at itong water cannons will be constituted as an attack on us, then the mutual defense will kick in. Then, you know, we will have a strong diplomacy because we will have a navy to back it up.
Which
but right
actually,
now, yes, ang US
it's a question, Senator. It's a question, Senator, no? Kung kailan actually papasok. Pasensya na po, meron lang tayong nag-overlap po tayo. Katanungan po yun di ba, sa MDT. Does this constitute an armed conflict? Kasi doon lang papasok si MDT, which actually is a question I wanted to ask you, because some would say, no, armed conflict would mean armed, hindi ho ba? Hindi water cannon. But sorry, sir, I know there's still so much to discuss. Just very few na lang po. In the past, you said that the former president, I mean, first of all, sir, former President Rodrigo Duterte was just in China speaking to President Xi Jinping. Sabi po ni Senate President Mig Zubiri, ang sinabi daw umano ni Pangulo kay Chinese President is be kind to the Philippines. And then 2 weeks later, such an incident occurs. What does that say, sir? Why would something like this happen 2 weeks after a former president visits China and their president?
Again, Pinky, we're in the right. Having said that, there have been many situations in the past that nagsasagutan ang Philippines at China and even the US and China at hindi nilalabas sa media lahat, no? So for example, when President Xi Jinping said in the White House they will not militarize the South China Sea, this was well reported, and intelligence agencies from around the world, yung mga allies, no, yung Five Eyes, may mga nilabas na information about that. The international media reported that, but it was not released and it was not reported that much that the US Navy was made sure that they were more active and more aggressive than in the South China Sea, which pushed China in the eyes of China to militarize the islands, no? So in the same case sa atin din, no, may mga nangyayari diyan on the ground. May mga naiipit tayo minsan sa strategic rivalry ng US at ng China. That's why hindi lang paglilinaw sa China na ano ba talagang gusto nyo at ano bang problema, ano bang red lines, paano ba natin ayusin to. But also with the US na bakit pag Japan automatic yung when President Obama visited Japan, he said any aggression sa Senkaku Islands, dun sa mga problema sa East China Sea, no? Automatic yung Section 5 ng Mutual Defense Treaty. Pagdating sa Philippines, sandali, we don't get involved in territorial disputes. So yes, an attack on a ship is an attack on the country, no? But what constitutes an attack? So tama ka doon. So going to your question, may malalim dyan. That's why I'm in favor that President Duterte become a very, very special parang senior minister type of special envoy. Pero hindi isang upuan lang to, no? And it should be done at the highest level. Okay. But having said that, Pinky, maraming alam ang ating Pangulo, like President Marcos right now, na hindi natin basta alam at hindi basta alam ng publiko. So even during briefing after briefing, ako mismo nagugulat ako sa ibang whether very aggressive against the Philippines or paminsan-minsan meron din tayong ina-attempt na not necessarily na sa usapan na dapat hindi gawin, no? So and sometimes we think it's harmless, but because hindi whole of government yung pag-uusap, 'di ba? So an example I can give, no, is yung pagtatayo ng huts para sa mga fishermen, no? Parating na bring up 'yan. But yun ang naging strategy ng China nung first nilang inoccupied and militarized yung kanila eh. So they consider that a violation of DOC, no? So yes, parang sobrang disturbing, 'di ba, na may magandang meeting, nag-report sa presidente, tapos tayo naman the Senate showed two things, no?
Yeah.
Firm resolve against harassment in the South China Sea, but an openness to deal with China, no? An openness for true dialogue, and then suddenly something like this happens. But I'm quite sure that we're right. But I'm also quite sure that there's something behind this. No, everyone is sending messages to each other. So when President Xi Jinping said, President Duterte promote ties between China and the Philippines, for me that was a signal. For me that is saying may problema ang relationship natin ngayon.
Okay, Senator, again, another break. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to have to say goodbye for now on television, but we'll continue our discussion on our Facebook Live with Senator Alan Peter Cayetano. Senator, maraming salamat po sa inyo. Thank you, sir. I'll see you in a bit.
God bless you. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.